Please join me in the responsive reading in your order of service. Let us welcome the Spirit of the East, the element of air.
All that is morning breeze and the wrath of storm.
And the Spirit of the South, whose color is red.
Come, all that is of passion, of heart fire and wildfire.
Gather us now, Spirit of the West.
Bring your manifold waters of morning dew and raging sea.
Stand with us, O Spirit of the North.
Let us remember and keep your elder wisdom that connects this sanctuary across the generations.
This is the church. This is the steeple. Open the doors and see all the people. Some people see a church as a building. Some people see church as the people. To me, it's the chemistry of both that make Fountain Street so special. Look at this place. A church built upon the ashes of its predecessor. Practically everyone is awestruck by the place. I often think of the folks who rebuilt this church almost 95 years ago. The stained glass characters in the rose window are incredible. Yet who decided that there would be 3 flakes, 25 large and 10 small stars around each of the 2 angels watching over us? How many blocks did the mason lay in one day? Did he turn around before going home to admire his work? Who came up with the irregular pattern of painted flowers and other shapes on the beams overhead? My name is Bruce Morrison, and I've been a part of this church for 25 years. I am married to Carolyn Kempter Morrison, and we have 2 daughters, Lee and Isabel. I tend to be an introvert. Some of us are extroverts. But this church takes all kinds, all of us, to make it great. If you've been coming for years or weeks, or perhaps you're new, you fit in perfectly. Using masonry as a metaphor, Fountain Street has flashy people who grace the columns with flowers or birds or symbols. Some of us are the supporting blocks, the arch blocks, or the keystone blocks. Some of us are the mortar that hold fast other blocks so they don't move out of place. Some of us keep things going behind the scenes, blocks you can't always see, but are most important at keeping the whole thing from tumbling down.
Oh, excuse me, Bruce.
This is my lovely wife, Carolyn. You interrupted me.
Sorry. I was just looking for the spirits.
What spirits? What are you talking about?
Well, you know that today is Goblin Sunday, right? Okay. And I have many happy memories of Goblin Sunday marching down the aisles with my character school pals. And you know that Goblin Sunday means that Halloween is just around the corner. It's less than a week away. And you also know that at this time of year, they say, whoever they are, they say that the veil between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead becomes, it's thinnest, okay? So, you know what that means? That means, I see dead people. But seriously, I believe that when people have to leave this earth, and we all eventually do have to leave, that they leave parts of themselves, certain aspects of who they were, behind in the places that they loved. And it will be no surprise to anyone to hear me say that there have been a lot of people that loved this place who are now gone. And I think that if there were ever a time of year when it would be easier to see them, that time would be now, when the veil is at its thinnest. You probably also know that in May, in Memorial Day, we always do the call to remembrance, where we invoke the names of people that have died in the past year. Well, I think that it's also a good idea to invoke the names of the dead at other times, particularly now, because that veil is really thin right now. And to remember that we would not be here, you and I and the rest of us would not be standing here and sitting here but for the work that people before us have done to keep the community here alive. I grew up here and I saw a lot of people from my parents' generation doing that kind of work, keeping this place going. And I would like to invoke some of their names, some of the dead that I can see in this space, whose past work allowed us to be here today. There's a whole bunch of them up in the choir loft right now. I don't know if you guys saw them, but I can see they're hanging out up there. Bev Howerton, Ken Childs is up there, Walt Bagby, Ann Logan is up there, and Bunny Voss, and Carolyn Johnson, and Vera Pryor, and Betty Boyce, and of course, Edie McCarger. There's some of my fellow Fountain Clubbers are up here in the the left-hand side of the balcony. We used to sit up there in the 70s when we came to church services. These are all people that didn't ever get to get old. Dave Greninger, Brad Cooper, Chris Jeffries, sorry. Steve and Susie Boltman are up there, and Mark Chandler. And there are others that I'm probably forgetting, but those are the ones that I see when I glance up there. And not far away from them, seated up there as well, is Jack Bowers, who was the youth minister at the time I was in Fountain Club, and he was our fearless leader, and he's up there too. Sometimes he shows up in his pulpit. And when I look around in the seats, way in the very back corner of the back of the balcony, in those last two seats on the right-hand side, my mom and dad, Sally and Paul, where they always sat. Not far from them are Ken and Gloria Cruz. Don Crandall is being an usher up there. He's got a collection plate in his hand. Helen Rosano is there, Joe Pierce, Marty Childs. I could go on, and I won't keep listing people because there are more people than I could possibly mention, but there are other people haunting other corners of the church. Myrtle Starr, Dorothy Evenson, and who could forget Magoo.
Okay, now it's getting crowded in here.
That's the cool thing about spirits. Doesn't matter how many of them there are, there's always plenty of room for more of them. So we don't have to worry about that. But let's remember them. Let's remember that they did what they had to do to keep this community alive. Let's honor them by doing what we have to do to keep this community going. And when the time comes that we have to leave, and that time will come, and we'll go to our chosen corners to haunt the church, let's hope that there will still be others here standing to talk in this pulpit and keep this community alive and thriving, because we all belong here, the quick and the dead, because this is Fountain Street Church.
A church of prayer for all people.
And all spirits.
Let's welcome the March of the Goblins.
They talk about the yoke of ministry, not the joke of it, but the yoke of it. I'm always astonished when colleagues of a non-theistic persuasion get up to speak, because honestly, there's not enough strength of soul or heart to speak in front of any number of people without summoning other forces to protect you perhaps, but also to assist you. I call always upon your goodwill and hope and kindness. Most weeks I will give you some words from Scripture, and I'll do that a little later. I wish to call attention always, as I do, to the struggle for people of color to obtain justice in this world. Most Sundays I lift up the story of someone who perished in the hands of law enforcement, only because it is the non-visibility of these events that needs to change. It's ordinariness. I don't have a story to bring you today. I have a button to bring you today. You can't read it, but it says Black Lives Matter on my lapel. And I joined the folks over at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church at Rosa Parks. They have carried on our tradition of demonstrating on a monthly basis. For years we did so on behalf of marital equality, and you know, sometimes if you throw a pebble at a rock long enough, the rock will break. We're throwing pebbles at racism now, and we're down there with signs months a month and holding up signs that say Black Lives Matter. We're all white, by the way, which is the point. And always someone goes by and says, no, all lives matter. And I say, of course. But we don't actually mean it in the way we treat each other. So I wish to lift up the reality that if you care about the questions of justice for people of color in this country, you need to say that. You need to say that Black lives matter to me. Not just in general, they matter to me. And that I care about not just everyone, but those who don't get enough care right now. And if you want to have that conversation with me and dispute me later, I will try to run as fast as I can to avoid that conversation, because I am your pastor. I don't want to argue with you, but you need to know where I live. And the boy growing up in Baltimore in the 1960s can never let go of the world that I beheld as a teenager. So with that in mind, let me turn to my other thoughts today, which are no less weighty, but perhaps a little less earnest. Actually, they are earnest to me. The question is, are they earnest to you? I noticed this week as I was composing my remarks, and I want to tell you the writing of sermons is not really the writing of... I'm not a sermon writer. I'm not even a sermon preacher. I'm a homily preacher. And the distinction is important. Sermons are meant for the damned. They're meant for the unfaithful, the infidel, to convert you. I'm not here to convert you. I presume you and I to share important values already. I'm here to goad you, to comfort you, to inspire you and annoy you into living the things that we say we're about. I'm preaching to the faithful, the people who wish to be together in this endeavor we call liberal religion. So talking just entre nous, just among us, I noticed something today, or actually this week, without noticing it, sometime in the last week or so, I reached a point where I have lived in Grand Rapids longer than I have lived any other place in my life. I don't know what that means. I just observed that I have been here longer than any place, and my bags are not packed. My life is not complete, so obviously I'm living differently now than I did in other times of my life. Of course, they say time flies when you're having fun. They also say it goes faster when you get older, and I can affirm both of those. Because in the end, time moves not to the click of the clock, but to the beat of the heart. The heart is where I'm talking all this month, mostly in October, how we feel about things. Thank you, Carolyn, for invoking that. How we feel about our lives and our circumstances. How it shapes how we live. We call ourselves rational, sensible people, and we are. But let's be honest, we are also formed and driven by our emotions. It happens all the time, and that's okay. And often these feelings that define and drive us arrive from another point in our past, our childhood, our youth. Who is not still tender in places that were bruised in childhood? Who is not still a little bit uneasy about those things of adolescence? There's a great old lady in this church who told me after she moved into a nursing home that moving here was like going back to junior high. People were always talking about one another and passing notes in the hall and asking who liked whom. I found that, as you did, charming. And then I realized we are always all the people we used to be. Even when we're 80, we're still 10 and 15 and 20 and 25. We are never just the age we are. We are all the ages we have ever been. For the last 2 weeks, I've considered ways in which our feelings that come from the past affect us in the present. And I was thinking about those things I called heartaches and heartbreaks, which I distinguish for the purpose of talking about them as the sorrows that imprison us, the heartaches that keep us from becoming the person we want to be, and the sorrows that liberate us, that tell us, move on. You can't go back. The heart breaks. For the next 2 weeks, I'm going to turn that around and talk about the feelings we have toward the future, our hopes, our dreams, and how these two can imprison us or liberate us. Hope for the future, of course, is basically what religion is all about. It's not confined to religion, of course. The great poet Percy Shelley observed that we look before and after and pine for what is not. Is that not true? It's universal. And like heartaches and heartbreaks, those that help and those that hinder can seem alike. What distinguishes a dream that draws us on to a fantasy that obsesses us and keeps us out of touch with reality? Yes, I would like to distinguish their names. I would call the imprisoning dream or hope the one that is the fantasy. I'll call that the heartthrob, which sounds like those junior high days, don't you remember? How many of us remember, well, some of us who are of a certain age, not old, but not yet young, but no longer young, when we saw magazines like Tiger Beat and other things, which had pictures of fresh young men that made all the teenage girls and all the 12-year-olds swoon. Somewhere around 12 years old, I think we begin to have romantic feelings in general. And of course, our entertainment culture depends upon it completely. So long before we had today's heartthrobs, the Justin Biebers, the Justin Timberlakes, there was Elvis. And many a teenage girl fell over in a swoon for him. And James Dean made many a girl, and I think many a boy, feel a little queasy with love. And even before that, in my mother's generation, Frank Sinatra was a skinny young crooner who sent, I don't know how many Bobby Soxers into a tizzy. By the way, those Bobby Soxers are the ones in nursing homes passing notes right now. Heartthrobs are what I call the impossible dreams. And after we give up the heartthrob that is the celebrity as a romantic object, we might move on to something more possible, like becoming a celebrity. It seems every child in America wants to be a pop musician or an actor or a professional sports star. How many kids on the baseball playgrounds of a modern America not only play ball, but are actually running color commentary in their heads? Shh, it's nothing but net, and the crowd goes wild, they say to themselves. Am I right? We all have some fantasy like that. We imagine fame or fortune of some kinds, and sometimes they really can propel us. but sometimes they can delude us. Heartthrobs are the delusional ones. It's if the heartache that imprisons us is like a depression that entombs any hope, a heartthrob is a fantasy so far out of touch with reality that we can't possibly get there, and yet we can't help dreaming about it. What is it? I'm thinking, who's the comedian who was always, you might be a redneck? Any remember his name? Jeff Foxworthy once said that the pension plan of the modern Appalachian is the lottery, which is a remote, almost impossible possibility, but it is nonetheless not completely impossible. Now, here's where I always want to tell a story about my own life, because the older I get, the more I realize my opportunities to tell funny stories or tender stories about me get fewer and fewer. And what's more, I said in September that from here on out, you're going to get as much honesty and reality from me as I can give you without you cringing at the effort. I'm going to talk to you as if my job did not depend upon it, at least try, even though I know it really does. But I thought about it and realized that our fascination as a culture with Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, who share nothing in terms of values, share one thing. They both seem to be completely frank about their point of view. They don't spin, they don't massage, they don't frame, they don't message. They are what they are, and people seem to like that. So maybe honesty has some novelty. Maybe I should try it more often. I've told you about my heartbreaks and my heartaches. Well, my heartthrob, which is something that still exists, but I'm beginning to question it. I'm a great preacher. Not just better than most, great. My teachers told me when I was good at this, you have a gift for this, young man. My students envied me. Public speaking doesn't scare me, clearly. And that's a fear most people have that is greater than the fear of death itself. I'm a fearless fellow. By great preacher, though, I mean someone people want to hear. Lots of people. Crowds of people. More important, perhaps most important, I will be admired by my fellow preachers as being superior. Invited to speak in other churches. Solicited to bring a thrilling word at an ordination, a convocation, a convention. Fantasy, clearly, has got the upper hand. Here's where a lesson from Scripture comes in handy. In the Parasha Lech Lecha, which was read in synagogues yesterday, we're in the story of Abram, not Abraham. He hasn't gotten quite there yet. But God said to Abram, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you and curse them that curse you, and all the families of earth shall bless themselves by you. Well, if my dream sounds like a fantasy, Abram is on steroids here. Mind you, when he gets this vision, he is 75 years old and doesn't have a child. He's hundreds of miles from his home in a place where he is a foreigner and not likely welcome, and he hears a voice telling him that you and your descendants will be as the sands of the sea and the stars of the sky. I only want to be the liberal Robert Schuller. He wants to be the father of everybody on the planet. Having hopes and dreams is universal. George Eliot, that wonderful writer, said so long ago, it seems to me we can never give up longing and wishing while we are still alive. We must hunger for them. And truly, if we don't have some hope, why do we get up in the morning and go on? If they take the form of personal dreams, a great job, true love, success. They can also be national dreams. American exceptionalism is a dream, and I would say in some elements it's a fantasy. And cosmic dreams, what else is a religion but a promise to get you into infinity, whole and intact? But anywhere that dreaming moves from what you can become to something beyond reality, it becomes a fantasy, a heartthrob, something that actually keeps you from living into the future but freezes you in your fantastic present. Mistaking fantasy for hope is the danger of the heartthrob. Now, I have to admit, one of the reasons I'm a liberal in religion, maybe one of the reasons you are, is that we're not quite as susceptible to that. We do not pretend to be selling condos in a posthumous paradise. We are not infatuated with a fantasy that we cannot prove or disprove. This was an important week in the Protestant church because it was Martin Luther on the 31st of October in 1517, All Saints' Eve, Halloween, posted a document on a church door demanding a debate on this matter of selling indulgences. The Roman Catholic Church was selling indulgences to help you get your mother, your father, your grandparent out of purgatory a little faster. Like I said, selling condos in perpetual paradise. And because Martin Luther questioned that, there is a Protestant church. And because there's a Protestant church, there's a Fountain Street church. So we should at least gesture toward some gratitude that without Luther questioning that, we would not be here. But the trouble is, we didn't stop questioning. We kept asking, well, if about indulgences, what about bishops? And about bishops, what about sacraments? Sacraments and creeds. Basically, in the end of it, we said everything is up for grabs. We're not only Protestants, we are such Protestants, we won't even be one. And of course, religions are just one example of going in that direction. But I want you to go back to my dream come fantasy for a moment in this liberal context we have. When I came here over 10 years ago, remember, I'm a great preacher. Remember that. And you're a great church, right? We should be full by now. I should be doing this 3 times a day, but it didn't happen. See, I spent a lot of years in smaller churches, tiny churches, little bitty churches. I preached my heart out to 15 at a time. But then I said when I got here, finally, a place that's willing to go somewhere. And they were willing to listen to me. And it didn't happen. It turned out my dream was a fantasy. I had lifted myself into an unrealistic expectation of who I was, not who I would become, who I was. I grossly overestimated my own magnificence. My dream was not coming true because it wasn't a dream, it was a fantasy. There are 2 tragedies in life, said George Bernard Shaw. One is to lose your heart's desire. The other is to get it. I'm not sure what he meant by that, but it made me think that maybe this confusion of fantasy for dream, hope for fantasy was powerful. Maybe we think we want this, but what in fact is we want that. But this is the thing we can see, and that's the thing we can't. There's a contemporary philosopher, kind of a bad boy philosopher. I'm trying to get his name right. Slavoj Žižek. He's Serbian. And he says, as I did my research this week, the problem for us is not are our desires satisfied or not. The problem is, do we know what we desire? That's the point I want to make this morning. We don't know what it is we hope for. We have hopes. We may even have dreams. Sometimes we have fantasies, to be sure. But what we really desire, we may not even know. We are, shall we say, fixed on one thing when we are actually wanting to go to that thing. Now, here's what I'm trying to say. We cannot tell our true desires from the false. I think it was Mark Twain who said the difference between the right word and the almost right word was the difference between lightning and lightning bug. We want lightning in our life. Abundance, joy, power, hope, thrill, meaning. But we are dazzled and distracted by fantasies of success, prestige, wealth, and power. We see them in the news all the time. They're in all of the media. Where do we pay attention to the people who make the movies, who hit the home runs, who appear on the news? Isn't that what we want? It's hard to distinguish what we truly want if we had all the honesty in the world from those things we're told we want. We've been sold a jar of lightning bugs and told that is lightning. I saw myself as a great preacher because that is how success and prestige and power looked to me. And I wanted to be approved of and admired and respected. And if I could do that, then I would have all that. And I am wrong. Because what I really want is to be alive in a way that gives both of us the courage to be alive today. I want my words not to be the magic. I want my life to be the magic. And for you to sense that when I speak to you, there's hope for you to have magic in your life too. Not magic that goes poof like, no, the magic that's already out there and just waiting to happen. What Adrian Sweats called the magic in the heart of the universe. That's what we want. And sometimes it happens here in the pulpit. Most of the times it doesn't. More often than not. It happens in a quick conversation or a chance opportunity. A place where someone needs to be heard or a time to put a hand on a shoulder and suddenly there's a little aliveness that wasn't there. And when I get that, I don't need the sizzle of success. I don't need the crowds of approval. I don't need even you to be in this room because at that moment I am alive. And that's all you want. And you want it for everybody else too because you can't want that for yourself and not want it for everyone else. Am I right? I think that's our challenge as a church. We're going through an envisioning process this year, and that's very important. You need to be a part of it. And the question I would put before us collectively is, can we tell hope from fantasy, the lightning from the lightning bug? It is fun to stand in this pulpit and be in this place. It's fun to be well known and large and powerful. Sometimes kind of cool when someone recognizes you from seeing you on cable TV. It's actually kind of scary too. But none of those things are my heart's desire. If I am really honest with myself, none of those are my heart's desire. And what is our heart's desire? We want to liberate ourselves and others to be fully present in this world and not in the last or even the next, to be fully present right now. We want to liberate people to be who they are right now and not try to be someone else along the way. We want to animate people with a hope that life really does matter and it's not a down payment on some future real estate in a place in heaven. We want to agitate against the powers and principalities that would sell every one of us lightning bugs and call it lightning. The first year I was here, I had a banner printed up, put it up there, and you saw it. It was Mother Teresa saying, God did not call me to be successful. God called me to be faithful. You don't have to believe in God to get that, do you? That banner has vanished. The fantasy of fame and fortune is a very powerful one for churches as well as people. I feel it. We all do. It takes profound courage to give up the lightning bugs and the bright lights for the true lightning. Only real hope can beget real courage. The thing that makes our heart beat, not just throb. Our heartbeat is what is at stake. And I'll tell you about heartbeats next week. But it's something worth living toward, not something you are waiting to happen to you. A heartthrob is something you're waiting to have happen. Come, Justin Bieber, and marry me. Come, lottery, shower rain upon me. Come, good fortune, whatever it is. That's a heartthrob. You're waiting to be discovered by something and swept off your feet. That's not what we're here for. And that's really not what we want. But what is it? What is it that we want? Well, I'm going to tell you in the next few weeks what I think it is, for us and for me. And I will need your help, and I'll need your faith in me so I can speak aloud those things that I'm afraid to say, because I don't want to be laying a trip on you, and I don't want to be making you do anything, because I don't want to. I just want to tell you. I want to share with you. I want to have the nerve and the forgiveness to share with you what I think our heart's desire is. Because when we can find that heart's desire, everything else becomes trivial. Everything else is just a means to an end. Everything else doesn't matter, because as it says in the gospel about the merchant who gave away all for the pearl of great price. Once we know what our heart's desire is, that true thing that makes our hearts beat day in and day out, we will be unstoppable as a community. And I will be unstoppable as a preacher. And we will, in fact, know our heart's desire, throbbing or otherwise. See you in church. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer.
Go now in peace.